Many of our listeners have been asking for more alumni interviews. Well, guess what? The good news is the time is now. Join me for this conversation with Ashton Lawrence as he reflects on his journey from 5th through 12th grade and the lasting impact of his classical Christian education. Ashton speaks candidly about the challenges along the way and the memorable moments and how he's grown to appreciate even more as a college graduate the impact that his education had on him. Join us now for this interview on BaseCamp Live.
Mountains, we all face them as we seek to influence the next generation. Get equipped to conquer the challenges, summit the peak, and shape exceptionally thoughtful, compassionate, and flourishing human beings. We call it Ancient Future Education for raising the next generation. Welcome to BaseCamp Live. Now your host, Davies Owens.
Welcome to another episode of BaseCamp Live. Davies Owens, your host here with you. Thank you for making the decision to listen and hitting play. I recognize as someone who talks often about the cultural moment that we're in and the challenges of having so many things that distract us and pull us in many directions, that a long-form podcast like this is still very popular and on the playlist of many of you. And I appreciate that because there are a lot of things you could be listening to or doing right now. Well, actually, in fact, you probably are doing a lot of things like sitting in traffic or maybe getting some chores done around the house, whatever it may be. That's the beauty of on-the-go audio like Zipcast and like BaseCamp Live. It's just a way to connect with people, and I appreciate the time that you're taking right now. Listen, with that being said, I want to introduce you to an amazing young man. Ashton Lawrence grew up in Boise, Idaho. He attended the Ambrose School, a K-12 school in the Boise, Idaho area, where I was on staff for a number of years and where our children went back in the day. He's also close friends with our family, having grown up with our children, especially our two boys, Liam and Bennett, who are all close friends. After Ashton graduated Baylor University, he went on to join us on the Zipcast team. In fact, if his name sounds familiar, it's because he's part of our sales and client services team. Many of you have likely spoken with him if you are an administrator at one of our Zipcast schools. I'll let him tell the rest of his story as we jump into the interview. But before we do, as always, a special thank you for those organizations that have come alongside us to make this episode possible. Wilson Hill Academy, the Champion Group, the folks at the Wise Phone, Zipcast, of course, which, by the way, is our organization. And I always mention this time of year that we still have opportunities for schools to sign up for the remainder of the year. So it's not too late. You can check out more at zipcast.media. And then finally, just a shout out to the Herzog Foundation, our partnership there, as well as Life Architects Coaching. All of these organizations are here to serve you. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Ashton Lawrence. Ashton Lawrence, welcome to BaseCamp Live.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm excited.
I'm excited to have you here. You know, it's not uncommon for folks who meet me to say, you know, some of the best episodes you've ever done are when you talk to an alumni. And I thought I have just the alumni in mind, which is you. And I know that those listening may wonder why. Well, I consider you really to be kind of part of our family. I've got, you know, Hannah and our two sons, Liam and Bennett, but you really grew up with Bennett and we've done a lot of life together and your journey is unique. And I would love for folks to kind of hear a little bit of the Ashton Lawrence story. So just for folks who don't know you, kind of give them your story. Where did you start out? Where do you live? What's the background?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Ashton Lawrence. I'm a graduate of the Ambrose Classical Christian School in Boise, Idaho. And I started my journey with classical Christian education about 5th grade. My father had found out about it as he was looking into, he wanted a little bit more of a rigorous and rich education for me. So he started digging and found the classical school here in Idaho that was local to us. And I managed to get in around 5th grade, and I've sort of traveled the...
You rode all the way through to the end.
Yeah, I rode all the way through to the end, and I have it's a fantastic experience.
We'll talk about the end in a minute. We'll stay at the beginning. So,
yeah.
So he had how did he find classical? Because it's new for so many parents. So he was just out looking for something different.
Genuinely just hunting for the highest quality of education. He had homeschooled me for a little while, and then we'd looked into Montessori schools for a little bit of more hands-on learning and things like that, because that was something that was important to my parents, that I have a little bit more tactile skills in the world. But as I got a little older, they wanted a little bit more of a academically rigorous and rich environment that could build, some character and that was focused around virtue and things like that. And I think just through his research, he found classical Christian education.
Yeah. So you started in 5th grade.
Yes. So I got in like last minute to Ambrose, and I think I had 2 first days actually. I had my first day at my old school, and then I started at Ambrose at 5th grade, and it was a big change of environment for sure. Just a little bit more of a rigid classroom environment with very lots of reading and writing, which was a little bit more unfamiliar for me. But I've now come to love that dearly.
Well, in 5th grade, especially at Ambrose, because it's the 5th grade play. So you kind of landed and got to do a Shakespeare play.
Well, 5th grade play, as well as that's when Tolkien begins. And that has had a magnificent impact on my life going forward. I have many, many copies of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, et cetera. And that was absolutely formative for my education and my understanding of great ideas, virtues, what good writing should look like, what should be found within a good book.
So, people obviously don't know you who are listening, and so there's, I guess, the suspicious ones might be, well, Davies went on and just found the kids that, just naturally love those old book kind of things. But I mean, was this when again, it's hard to think about your life pre-5th grade, but I mean, do you think you would have had a love of Tolkien if you had just stayed in Montessori or maybe gone public? I mean, how much of this is you and how much of you think is a school?
That's a fantastic question. So I have always loved reading, particularly in the sort of genre of Tolkien. But as that expanded into more works of more depth, as you get into the deep philosophy and theology, as you go through classical education, I'd be curious if that would have continued without the education that I had. I'm fortunate to have family members that are very passionate about similar topics, so perhaps it would have happened, but classical education gave me a very a good guide and an introduction to the topics.
So let's go back. I talk all the time about raising a generation, which is the whole real point of the BaseCamp Live. We're going up to what feels like the top of Mount Everest. It's really a joint effort between our schools, our home, and the church. And so as you think about your own family, you've had some unique dimensions of your family. I'm assuming your grandfather was one who really set some of that course for you. So talk a little bit about kind of what was the experience you had coming into the school as a family.
So thankfully my grandparents were also a very big part of me beginning classical Christian education. They were very excited. My grandfather was a priest and a very highly educated man himself.
He was actually Presbyterian there, right?
Yes,
okay.
And as well as
probably more of a pastor, but yes.
Yeah. As well as somewhat of a philosopher himself. Given his education.
I knew him actually. I had the joy of knowing him and officiated at his funeral recently and not too long ago. But so anyhow, you had the apples don't fall far from the tree. So there was definitely some of this. So, I mean, when you were a little kid, was this like, hey, gather around the fire, we're reading Homer together?
Not so much particular literary readings, but a lot of discussion. That was a core focal point of our relationship. Both him and my grandmother have always had rich, deep conversation. And most of my interactions with them have involved learning and education of deeper things, whether it be history, travel. I mean, my grandmother was a history teacher her entire career, and so she gave the sort of historical side of things, and my grandfather gave the theological.
You spent a lot of time with them.
I spent so much time with them. I'm truly blessed to have spent so much time with my
Because your biological dad passed away when he was younger. When you were young.
When I was 4, my biological dad passed away, and so I spent a lot of time with my grandparents as my mom was working. And it was very formative. I spent a lot of time curious about, our family history, the education my grandfather received, always talking about, biblical ideas, philosophy, et cetera.
I mean, so you had it's very clear that you had a home life that set the course that when you walked in, you can imagine a lot of students come in to classical schools like Ambrose, and this is not their home life experience. And so there'd be probably maybe some more resistance, like Tolkien. I don't read Tolkien. And so, but it came naturally for you.
To some extent, yeah. My family encouraged it and helped it flourish as it became more familiar. It may have been a bit unfamiliar just because, you're going to school every day. And so my exposure probably wasn't nearly as often as that.
So for those listening, it sounds like one of the, especially and thinking about the different seasons. So I'm still thinking of you in your 5th grade year. And in that season, you still had grandparents and parents who were asking questions. So like home life meant what? It was like more discussions at dinner tables?
Oh, yeah. That's always been a core aspect of our family is honest and deep discussion.
Wow. Even in 5th grade. Yeah.
Yeah. It's something that's, as my mom transitioned on after my dad passed away and remarried, that was always some very core aspect to something she wanted to be a part of our family is good quality conversation above all else. And so sometimes that's simple things, and sometimes that's very rich, deep conversation. And thankfully, my adopted father, who, as I mentioned, found classical education for our family, has always been deeply happy and encouraging to have good, deep conversations. So
you're like the perfect interview because you just love it and you did it at home and it's like the perfect match. But I mean, there must have been times where you were thinking, okay, is this really what I want to do? Is there?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
When did the resistance build? Or?
I would say when I was green, probably in the 5th, 6th grade range, I was very just curious and found the whole experience very interesting because it was unfamiliar to me as far as educational environment. And then probably going into junior high, I had probably the typical beginning of teenage resistance, probably just to most organized things. And classical Christian education is very rigorous. So probably a combination of the two and perhaps just a lack of understanding of the reasons why I was being educated in this way, having friends that were outside of classical Christian education and wondering like their experience is clearly different than mine. You know, why am I like wearing a uniform every day, et cetera. That there was absolutely some resistance for a period of time.
So you had a social life outside of school. I mean, you had other substantive friends that were influencing you.
I think. I mean, until I met y'all about I met y'all about my 7th, 8th grade year,
right?
And that was very, very good. It was a very a good core, aspect of community within the school,
right?
That I was able to build, and I think that helped a lot.
Well, friendships in the school, but did you had other? Were you involved in other activities? Like, how did you have other people that maybe made it feel like, is this the right school for me? Because my friends over here maybe don't have the homework, or they have other things that maybe seem more attractive.
Yes, so I did a lot of rock climbing. I competed all over the Northwest United States for.
Now, what age are you when you're rock climbing?
I think I probably stopped a few years into Ambrose, or I took a hiatus from competing.
Wait, you're at 5th grade. You stopped it.
I probably stopped rock climbing 6th grade.
Okay, all right.
But I had retained and knew a lot of friends, and that had been most of my social experience had been within this sort of
dangling by a rope. Yes.
Yeah, dangled by a rope and traveling to all these climbing gyms, which is not the same people environment as you can imagine as a classical Christian school.
So you weren't really. I mean, the point is you weren't sheltered. I mean, you knew what other people were into. You knew the other opportunities that were out there.
Yes, I spent a lot of time in outdoor sports.
So you mentioned sort of questioning. This seems like a lot more homework maybe than everybody else is doing. This seems a little weird with the uniforms. Were there other things you were
I think the smaller class size was confusing. I've always really enjoyed social situations, and so having a smaller class size was probably a bit frustrating at times.
Kind of met everybody pretty quickly.
Yeah, you met everybody very quickly, and I think I craved a larger environment with lots of other people, because I'd hear my friends say, "Oh, I've got 500 people in my class, and I've got friends everywhere, and we're always adventuring and sitting through deep books and talking about great ideas." I think was not fully appreciated at the time.
Yeah. Were there particular teachers that you felt like really made learning come alive for you?
Yes, absolutely, and I think that is sort of the saving grace of I mean, as it should be, of education, really. I had just fantastic teachers that made these subjects come alive and began to build the foundation for why I began to really appreciate them and love them.
Like who and at what grade?
I mean, I had teachers probably every grade. Well, my very first teacher at Ambrose was Mrs. Troyer, and she was fantastic, just so kind and welcoming for my big bright eyes as I was so confused as to what to do in a very structured classroom environment. And then going on, Mr. Duncan was great. We had so much fun going through Homer and some of the early. That would have been later in 10th grade.
Yeah, so I thought.
9th grade, we had our Latin teacher, Mr. Moore, who taught us logic and Latin.
Now, by the way, you don't normally hear this, and like looking back, like it was a lot. That's awesome. So,
yes,
why? Tell me why. What was the?
Well, Mr. Moore was a very young guy. I think he was fresh out of college, and so we had a really wonderful opportunity to see someone who had studied very similar things to us, and yet was fun and vibrant and made subjects like Latin and logic.
He wasn't just working in a bottom of a library somewhere.
No, and particularly logic. That class was life-changing for me.
Yeah, talk about that, because again, I think a lot of parents hear this and think, well, I never took Latin. I didn't take logic. Like, I mean, we'll get to sort of the contemporary world you're in now, but at the time you found that, what was attractive to you about it?
I think once the sort of foundations of the basic logic class began to click, it completely restructured the way that I thought about the way that I spoke, the way that I presented my ideas, what I thought, and it also changed the way that I listened to people. It changed the way that I was able to analyze what they were saying, and it allowed me to better understand what individuals were trying to portray when they spoke, and that was almost immediate, and I'm very grateful for that. And similarly for Latin, just the skills of being able to, dissect language and understand it, and just the way that it makes your brain work is just extremely helpful. And it has helped as I've studied future languages.
That's good to hear
through my latter years. So
it's not a dead language, maybe.
No, by no means. I mean, it's very much alive in its benefit as far as educating. It was rigorous for my mind, I must say. It was difficult at times, but I'm very glad that it was part of my education. So
going back to logic for a second, and let me leave you a question here. We'll take a break. I want to come back and get your response to it. So when you were taking logic, were there instances where you were able to apply that logic then to the real world, like finding fallacies in advertisements or political debates or...
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Well, I want to hear a story. We're going to take a quick break. I want to hear specifically how logic really helped you navigate. We'll be right back after the break. Today's episode of BaseCamp Live is brought to you by my friend Chris Casper, who you heard on a recent episode. His invention, the Wise Phone, is a much-needed third way, providing a solution from the dangers of a smartphone on the one hand and the limited capacities of an old-school flip phone on the other. His simple, distraction-free phone design for families who want technology to serve their real lives and give us and our older children a way to do basic essentials like calling or texting or maps without the web browser and the social media and the endless apps that can pull them and us into the addictive time-wasting aspects of a smartphone. I personally have a Wise Phone, and I can vouch that it is an excellent solution and an appropriate way to use technology that supports virtue and focus and healthy habits. Check out the link in our show notes and on our BaseCamp Live website partners page, where Chris is offering BaseCamp Live listeners a discount. School leaders, if you have ever wondered how to make school fundraising truly effective while being meaningful and mission-driven, join us at Advance. It's an event that's being run by the good folks at the Champion Group. The Advance is an April 8th through 10th, 2026 event in Greensboro, North Carolina. And here's the best part. It's completely free to attend. You just have to cover travel and lodging. Advance is for heads of schools, board directors, and leaders who feel the pressure of raising big dollars without losing sight of their calling. At Advance, you're going to find tools and training and encouragement while connecting with peers from across the country, learning from top development experts, and leaving with real-world strategies that you can take home and use right away. Plus, every attendee receives a complimentary development evaluation and review. Spots are limited, so don't wait. Register today. The details are in the show notes for this episode. Ashton, before the break, I was asking you about just moments where you could see logic, which we were talking about, having real-world application, because a lot of folks look at this and think, well, it just seems like another kind of odd classical thing. What does that have to do with anything? What for you as a energetic middle schooler did you make of logic?
I think the most prominent and the most immediate effect that it had, at least on me personally, was as we went through fallacies and understandings of what it meant to properly portray your point of view, your beliefs, et cetera, and also listen to and understand the beliefs and point of views of others. These fallacies became very apparent in my conversations, interactions with others, particularly things like the ad hominem fallacy, which is essentially attacking another person's either character, anything sort of personal about them, rather than breaking apart their argument itself.
You mean like modern politics?
Yeah, essentially modern politics. And so, like as an 8th grade boy, your instinct is to probably go for insulting or making fun of, rather than trying to understand the point of view of the person that you might be arguing with. And after we sort of went through these fallacies and understood exactly how they were used and the harm that using them had on understanding and communication, I found myself thinking about that when I interacted with people, trying to take into account their actual point of view as it was, rather than the individual saying it, or anything else that might, allow me to say, get a point in on said argument. So that was very formative. And I may not have realized it at the time, but looking back now, it's extremely beneficial.
Yeah, and that again, we're Americans, we love utilitarian things. So like, you're doing this for what reason? And you talked about Latin sometimes just was for you just kind of almost like a puzzle. It was sort of a mental exercise. But then the residual benefits long term have been, it really has helped you with other learning and reading and English language and now foreign language study. So let's continue. So we've kind of been in the middle school years, thinking about high school, and then we'll get into college life for you. High school for you, was it equally smooth? Did you wake up some mornings and go, I am for sure not clear on why I'm here, or did you go the other way and say, I'm for sure clear, this is where I need to be? What was your experience?
Yeah, I would say beginning of high school, I was still very much had doubts as to why this form of education was beneficial and what the real purpose of it was.
And let me inject this for a second. Do you feel like this feels not the right word? Looking back on it, do you believe that maybe the school was inadequate in explaining it to you? I mean, was there, and I'll just sort of, the punchline of my question is that I think so often we school leaders put a lot of emphasis on, certainly on new families coming to our school and convincing parents to stay at our school, but it's almost like we ignore the students and just say, put on your uniform and enjoy the ride. It'll be over in 12 years, as opposed to pulling you aside at maybe at middle school or certainly high school and just saying, hey, let's talk about the history of education. Let's help you understand how you're different here. It's not an elitist thing. I mean, how did that work out for you? So there were moments where you doubted. So talk about the doubt first, and then I want to hear how you kind of resolve that.
Yeah, I think there definitely was a lack of understanding, perhaps due to my own just lack of putting the pieces together, or I think there was also a lack of a very clear explanation as to why the various parts of our education were important and why they connected in particular. I've mentioned classes and individual parts of my experience that were enjoyable, but that's from a perspective of looking back now, because I can see how they all connect and how they all helped form me into the individual I am today. At the time, I probably saw individual classes and teachers that I enjoyed, but had no real understanding of how they were supposed to interact with each other, why they were important, the connections between, let's say, logic and my humanities classes, et cetera. And I think it would have been beneficial to have a little bit more of a clear understanding.
So if you could time machine back and catch yourself in 9th, 10th grade and pull yourself aside and take 10 minutes, what would you say? Like, what would you say about what you know now as to why it's so beneficial?
I would say all of those things that I learned were essential to me being the individual that I am now, the variety of aspects of my character, being able to think clearly and critically about various issues and beliefs, and the way that has helped me interact with other people. I think that's been the most beneficial part, is it has allowed me to understand people much better.
So when you compare that then maybe to a real or hypothetical friend that you think that didn't go through it, how does their life look on a daily basis compared to yours different because they don't have that understanding that you do?
They may not understand what they believe as well, which means they can't communicate it as well to someone that doesn't understand what they believe. And similarly, they may not be able to understand what others are trying to communicate to them. So I feel as if I have an ability to translate at a deeper level the true intent and content of communication between individuals. Now, it's not perfect, obviously, but I find it much easier to hear and listen to people and have genuine understanding for
Is some of that coming to you because of the books, the history you read? Like, the idea that there's nothing new under the sun. When you're hearing people talk, you're like, oh, we read about that. There was something actually in the Iliad. I mean, can you connect these, the classical readings and ideas with contemporary world. Is that what you're talking about?
That as well is very, very, so there's the sort of the skills-based learning, right? Which allows, critical thinking, ability to interact with others. But then there's also the connection of ideas themselves. And so, you're studying later on in school and you say, oh, this is extremely familiar. I've seen this before. This is just a revised version of whatever ancient individual, or you can tell this is clearly influenced by someone that we'd studied. So absolutely, the effects are very, very beneficial, because what I began to understand later is that we were studying the core, the foundations of our culture today. And so when studying that culture, as I moved on into further education, I was able to, I had a good understanding of the foundation of where a lot of this had come from, as well as a lot of where our culture had come from. So it was very beneficial in rooting me in an understanding of where our sort of way of life had originated.
So talk a bit more. You were talking about a few minutes ago just about how your belief was matured or enhanced, and you're talking about just understanding where you've come from. Give some details around that. Like how do you think classical Christian education helped you have a deeper appreciation, ownership maybe of your faith? What was your kind of faith journey as it compares to, I guess, the passing through education?
I think classical Christian education gave me the tools to understand the deeper aspects of the beliefs that I held, and so I could defend them well, but also look at them critically and sort of put them through the ringer, perhaps, and then come out the other side with a much firmer understanding and a firmer belief in both the values and the spiritual beliefs that I held.
Did you ever go through a crisis of belief or faith for you?
I think quite honestly, the faith aspect came much later. I think classical Christian education gave me a very good ability to work through the logic and the reasoning of, a supreme being, a creator. That wasn't all that difficult for me to understand. Just through pure observation, it does not seem very very complicated at all. This has to have come from something. And in my mind, just given personal life experience, it seems that there's a supreme being. But the more detailed and in-depth, faith journey came later as I began to experience more life and began to reflect upon it more. And that came as I grew in maturity and actually began to put a lot more thought into it rather than treating these sorts of things as school assignments or just part of a given week. Yeah.
Well, let's keep moving forward. So now let's say you're at senior year and you're about to head off to college. Talk about sort of what was those final few years like for you?
The last 2 years of high school were excellent. I think my junior year is when I really began to see all of the pieces sliding into place as far as the previous years of education. It all started to make sense. I suddenly felt that I could understand things and I could pull from past classes and past learning and experiences and apply them all of a sudden to what we were learning in the present. And that was just unbelievably exciting for me. I think in our junior year, we read Dante and a variety of C.S. Lewis works as well. And those were just magnificent. I thoroughly enjoyed diving into the history and really, I think a lot of what we dove into was what it meant to live a good life. And I think that practical application has stayed with me throughout my years and is a big reason why I have continued to study what I study, is the emphasis of understanding that this education was forming us to be people that could live a good, fulfilled, fruitful, virtuous life.
So let me just curious your thoughts, because I think a lot of folks listening probably in our contemporary moment, and I'm thinking in particular of parents making decisions about, is this the right decision for our family, probably have to navigate this question of classical is great, but it sure feels like it's kind of a throwback. It's kind of like, let's go join the Amish and let's read a bunch of books that were all written 500 plus years ago, written by a bunch of old dead white guys in a very, world that celebrates things that aren't just of the West. So how would you sort of address that concern? And from what you've seen, why do you believe this Western centric, great books, old dead white guy, education is so good?
Well, it's given me a good understanding of our culture, right? And with that given understanding of, or at least sort of the idea behind the society that we live in, right? The ideal sort of, Western American ideals and dream. And now I understand the foundation and the reason why those were so important, and the reason why they work in many ways. I mean, reading ancient Greek philosophers in particular, they are just as relevant today as they were when they were written, if not more so. I mean, much of my daily thought and evaluation of current events, I often draw back to those early works to understand and give me a perspective on events and the state of the world.
So to be in particular, I'm thinking about so many of your contemporaries went off to whatever school, and which is dominated generally by more left type thinking, and the idea of even something is core basic as capitalism versus socialism. I mean, do you feel like that, as you recall back and think about it, what I'm hearing is you were a bit more inoculated because you could hear when the rhetoric of the modern world came at you, you could say, wait, I've heard these arguments before. I think I understand where there is weakness and where there's concern.
Absolutely.
Is that right? Yeah.
And not even, there's definitely familiarity of arguments, but then there's also just a broad enough skill set to be able to evaluate arguments that I hadn't seen before, and look at them to see what of them was valid, valuable, true, etc., and what wasn't.
Yeah. Well, let's take another break. We're going to talk about your college years, and I want to kind of tee up the question of, were there things now as we enter you into college season and you look back that maybe you think the school maybe could have done better at, maybe could have emphasized something a little bit more, or to the point you're just making, things are always changing so quickly. So did you land on your feet in a world that you were ready for, or did you find yourself like the little Amish kid showing up in the big city thinking, oh my goodness, is that a car? I'm used to a horse. How do I know? I know that wasn't the story, but we'll be right back and hear how you will answer that.
If you're seeking an education that helps your child thrive academically and spiritually, Wilson Hill Academy has spent years developing a model that I want you to know about. In their free guide, you'll see how their thoughtfully sequenced curriculum prepares students for college and how a biblical worldview helps them understand the world around them with clarity, and how their discussion-based classes teach them to think critically, not just what to think. You'll also discover how their teachers equip students to live purposefully for Christ. With accredited live online classes, your child can learn from master teachers anywhere with an internet connection, all within a community that has transformed families like yours. Download their free guide today at wilsonhillacademy.com/guide or in the link in our show notes. During this short break, I have a special invitation to all school leaders, administrators, and teachers. I want you to imagine for a moment stepping away from your everyday routine at school and diving deep into the rich foundations of Christian education, surrounded by world-class scholars, seasoned classroom teachers, and administrative experts with years of experience running schools with a lot of wisdom to share. That's exactly what the Herzog Foundation's Institute is offering. I've had the joy of serving as a training coach for the last few years, leading their 2.5-day training on spiritual formation and another one on parent engagement. They offer close to 50 unique training events ranging from board governance to marketing to classroom best practices. They even offer a training on how to teach the great books. And the best part of all, well, thanks to the generosity of the Herzog Foundation, these training events, including lodging, are completely free for Christian educators. Institutes are located around the country in beautiful locations, including at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., and the Reagan Library in Santa Barbara. Don't miss this incredible opportunity. Check out the details at theherzogfoundation.com. Ashton, the big day came that you graduated K-12 and you headed off to college. Where did you go to college?
I went to Baylor University in Waco, Texas. Sick 'em Bears.
How did you decide to go to Baylor?
I wanted to go to a larger university. As I mentioned previously, I've always sort of craved
the big life,
the big social environments. People are just great.
Yeah.
But I wanted to go to a Christian school, and most particularly, I wanted a environment where I could still have a lot of access to teachers and professors. That was one of the most beneficial aspects of going to a smaller school that I appreciated afterwards. Is I still know my teachers from high school to this day. I interact with them, usually when I'm back in town, and that's just wonderful. And so I wanted something similar. I wanted to get small class sizes within a school, and Baylor offered all of those things. It was a good school. I had your eldest son, Liam, was already attending, and so I had a good understanding of what the environment was like. And so, it was. Then I don't know. I just felt right. I wanted to.
So the questions that are often asked is, you've come out of a fairly small school, as you indicated, and typically the social life dimensions of a small classical school are quite different than a campus with 15,000 students. So how did you adapt socially, first of all, and then I want to hear about your academic engagement.
Socially, it's a completely different environment. Fortunately for me, I don't really, I thrive in an environment like that, but I can absolutely see how going from a very small classroom setting to a social setting, both in the classroom and outside of it, that is full of just far more possibilities of difference in interaction, all sorts of flavors of people. I could understand it being overwhelming, feeling unprepared for that. And I could definitely see the being unprepared for the variety of different just
So if you could be a school administrator for a moment, and you could, knowing that you're about to launch young people into such a different environment, what would you do differently to maybe prepare them?
Giving them an understanding that they're going to meet people that come from a variety of different backgrounds. Going through the education that I did, you're around very similar people that have most of the time had very similar upbringings, have very similar family, home lives, all go to church, etc. At a larger university, many people are just there because it's a very good academic university. Not all of them are there because they wanted to go to a Christian university, or they're very passionate about religion, theology, etc. And so understanding that people will have a completely different life story, a very different life experience, and that will result in them being very different people when they interact with you.
So if, again, kind of a broad question, but when you think about the many students that you were sort of immersed into that freshman year, and the year started rolling, and for the next 4 years, you had a lot of academic expectations on you and other social things you were just talking about, could you tell maybe things that you believe you were more prepared because you were classically educated that maybe those around you were not? Not to be judgmental here, but just to say, how did you feel equipped, or what was helpful to you?
Yeah, personally, I felt very equipped to retain my beliefs that I had formed through my final years of high school. Those felt very steady. I didn't feel that they were shaky very much, because I had a good understanding of why I believed what I believed. And so that aspect was very comforting to have. I was not a very confused individual. I was not very, affected by the variety of different rhetoric and point of views of other people. I was able to reason through their beliefs and conclude that, I think the way that I want to live my life, and the sort of virtues that I think are good.
So do you see a risk in a lot of young people that come from, very conservative homes that you talk about, again, small class sizes and very tight home communities, which is what we want, but the downside could be really not preparing them for the big city, if you will, and therefore the temptations come, and they're maybe less familiar with how they're going to navigate them, or maybe they're in a mindset of saying, I'm done with that, I want something new. I mean, so I'm sure you saw some of that. Yeah, absolutely.
There's infinitely more negative influences in a large university environment where you're freshly an adult. You're around a variety.
But wait, I thought this was a Christian school.
Yes, but I mean, fortunately, Baylor, I will say, has a very, very strong Christian community, stronger than I've seen at many other Christian schools. But that's not always the case. And frankly, a lot of people graduating from a Christian school are not going to go to a Christian college.
Right. And there's a lot of opportunity, I know, from if folks haven't heard the interview with Liam, because he got into that too. I mean, it's certainly not a complete, nowhere is fully anything, but you definitely have a lot of the world in the Baylor community too. So you've got if you want to do whatever, you can go do whatever. I mean, you've got utter freedom. But so in that, you had to make decisions for yourself. How am I going to navigate my life? And you're saying you believe that your education was very formative in giving you guidance to make the right decisions.
Absolutely. I had a vision of what I viewed as a good life. I had a very good understanding of the foundations of what good virtuous behavior was, and so that was a good guide through the sort of tempest of
Right.
the first year of college.
So in the few minutes we have left, I want to talk about your impressions of, well, and folks want to know kind of where you are now, because obviously so much of the investment that parents make in K-12 is the hope that not only will they'll get into a good college, that's fine, but we all know that that's barely the beginning of life. And so how you navigate what's to come later. So when is the Baylor years were winding down, you ended up, talk about your major, you majored in?
Yeah, I majored in philosophy. No surprise.
Which everybody would be. And sort of like disclaimer, that's not sort of, and some parents are like cringing going, okay, gosh, that's exactly what I don't want to happen, is they have all this classical stuff and then they go off and they major in philosophy and then they're work at McDonald's indefinitely. No, and I mean, there's a lot of talk about that, because I know your grandfather was a philosopher.
My biological father was also studied philosophy.
So it's in your DNA. Yes. You had no excuse. I mean, you couldn't help it.
Yeah. So my influences to study philosophy go far deeper than simply my K through 12 education.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So that's by and I've been very blessed to pursue a variety of other things besides just philosophy. I studied it because I wanted to continue that pursuit of understanding what it meant to live a good life. I didn't intend to study it when I first went to college. I did a year of business, and I fell in love with it. But
when you have aspiration, you talk about law school. I mean, this is not. I mean, your aspiration, and again, anybody who's a philosophy teacher, or again, it's not to disparage that. That's fine. That's a good calling. But I think that the fear, again, perhaps for many in the classical as parents, is the end game of this going to ready them for the AI world that they're walking into, and for all of the rapid changes in the business world. I mean, what would you say to that concern or question?
I think it's actually prepared me extremely well, because my skills as a thinker are much sharper than I think most individuals coming out of their degrees.
Yeah.
I think I'm a lot more. I can apply myself very broadly to many different things. I mean, I've done several business internships through my time in college, as well as looking at pursuing law school, as well as a variety of other fields. And I feel very well prepared for all of them.
Yeah.
I can understand the nuances of them. I can understand how things are structured. So I really have no regrets as far as my degree pursuit.
And knowing as well, I mean, again, you're like another son, so I'm very aware of kind of how God's gifted you and your interests. And I mean, that's why, and folks that are listening so far are wondering, wait, Ashton, I know an Ashton. Is that the Ashton at Zipcast? The answer would be, yes, that's the Ashton at Zipcast. So quite honestly, when I came to, let's find the best person we can find to manage our customer service, which for those of you who are in Zipcast schools, you know that this is a really important role, because Ashton is talking to, 100 schools that are in our system right now, and people are calling, and you're having to navigate problems sometimes. You're having to explain and guide. And so talk about, again, how your education's prepared you for this customer service role, this sales role that you've got right now with us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's allowed me to, well, as far as just the rigor of my education has given me a little bit of a head start as far as just ability to
keeping up with a startup.
Keep up with a startup, which is far more than just managing all of the Zipcast schools, as well as just like I've mentioned previously, just classical education really helped me as far as just communicating with people. I'm able to have a much easier time clearly understanding and communicating when there's issues, or when schools are trying to express something to me, I need to explain something. I also work with training schools as we onboard them onto our platform, and that's been very beneficial. And obviously, since we work with Christian and classical schools primarily, I have a very
you can speak the language.
Yeah, I speak the language a little bit.
You can break into Latin in there.
Yes. So that's been extremely beneficial, but it's been very broadly applicable.
Yeah.
I mean, we've done a lot of other things. We've worked in automotive. We've done a lot of conferences together.
Yeah. And just in the few minutes we have, I definitely want to talk about this, and it's probably worthy of a whole other podcast. And anybody that's listened for a while knows that I am, I'm a huge fan of the common arts. So I think, again, there is maybe a concern that if one is classically Christian educated, you're kind of siloed into a very liberal arts type of career. And I don't know of a better education for someone who wants to be in the trades. And so, again, folks know me that I'm a huge auto restoration guy. I'd rather, I don't want to say I'd rather, but there are times where I'd rather be breaking down an engine than, maybe sitting and reading something. And I think it's both. But talk about your experience with the trades, with hands-on How has the education kind of worked for you there?
As far as the problem-solving aspect, the sort of liberal arts education, as you mentioned, has actually been very beneficial. It's allowed me to think very deeply as we work on cars and find problems, things like that. But I would say I wish there was more opportunity to put that into practice. I think that's something that we have talked about at length.
When you say put that, what are you talking about?
Put our educational sort of skills into practice for those common arts. There's not as much of an opportunity within this kind of education to do it within an educational.
Yeah, but don't you think, I mean, Matthew Crawford's book, and Bennett, your friend, my son, who wrote his senior thesis on why the liberal arts need the common arts is, and this is Matthew Crawford's shop class of Soulcraft. I mean, his whole premise is that there is more logic in many ways going on in a motorcycle repair shop when you're having to deduce why the carburetor's not working, thinking through that process, which again, anybody that owns a business today, I'm sure would agree that unfortunately so many young people come to work and they simply don't have the ability to problem solve or don't have a strong work ethic. So they encounter something they've not seen before and they panic as opposed to saying, oh, okay, well, let's figure out how this thing works. What I hear you saying is that no, we can approach the unknown even in a mechanical, physical world in the same way that you can in a verbal, spoken, written philosophy world.
Yes, absolutely. It's, I mean, even this week as we've been toying with a variety of cars here at the house, I've been using my logic skills most every day. It's like, oh, well, this is going wrong. What are the possible causes? And you eliminate them. Slowly. It's very similar and very applicable. I found it very beneficial, and it's very calming when you're problem solving things. It helps to narrow your focus and give you a very linear path towards a solution. Whereas I could easily see being overwhelmed without an understanding of how to.
Well, and just to, and we should have said this a minute ago, but just to give some context. So the experience that we're talking about for probably, I don't know, 6 years, maybe 7, we were part of an organization founded here in Boise called Rebuilding Generations. It was basically like a youth group, but it was car repair. So every Tuesday night, you and Bennett and I don't know, a dozen other folks would be over in our shop, and we would have the opportunity to have some devotions and eat a meal together, and then we would go work on a project. The ultimate project, of course, was we get to restore.
Yes.
Which is a whole other podcast, which we don't have time for. But just tell people what we did, because it's kind of a fun story.
Yeah, so we took a very rare European automobile, Italian-made, Volvo designed.
Made by Bertone.
Yeah. The famous designer of such classics as the Lamborghini Countach. And we had the wonderful opportunity to restore it down to the last bolt. So we spent 2 years. We put it on a rotisserie like a big chicken, and we made every inch of that thing perfect. Yep. And then we took it to Las Vegas, and we displayed it with the greatest automobiles in the United States.
Really,
in the world, really.
SEMA, which is a world-renowned experience. So again, for time, I'll put a pin in it. People are like, no, what in the world are they talking about? The point of all this is to say, and I love this about you, is that you're multidimensional. So it's sort of the idea of the Renaissance man. You can have the conversation, you can write the paper, you can give the speech, but you can also problem solve, whether that's in a legal environment or whether it's trying to figure out why the timing belt isn't correct on the car.
Yes, absolutely. I would be a quite a useless mechanic without my previous education.
Which again is classically educated mechanics. I think that's a whole new genre that we need to make sure people know is quite possible. And I always say, I hope the day comes soon where in the K-12 graduation, and there's Ashton, and Ashton is going to Baylor University, and then and here comes, and Bennett is going to welding school. But it's like, but Bennett's going to end up making $150,000 a year and no debt.
No, that's to that point. That was I had a unique opportunity to go to college and study something that I really enjoyed. Yeah. But both the trades, welding in particular, as well as automotive work, were very, very. I was very keen to pursue those. Yeah. Because I see those as honorable pursuits. Some of the art that is created by fabricators and car builders is just unbelievable.
It is. We should do a podcast on why classical people need hand-built Italian cars. I think that's a good story.
Absolutely.
All right, Ashton. Well, thanks so much. Any final words of wisdom to parents and school leaders listening?
Stick it out. It's absolutely worth it. Even if your children don't appreciate the education they're getting now, they will. I am beyond grateful that I received the education and the further opportunities that resulted from it.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much. Just joy talking with you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of BaseCamp Live. Be sure to check out our website, basecamplive.com, for more than 8 years of timeless episodes that you'll find helpful and encouraging, as well as the helpful resources offered on our partners page. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of our partners like the Herzog Foundation. See you back next week.